Hi everybody, welcome back to the Four Chains. Have some questions for Jim here today because there's been a lot of attention recently on some fights over the years that his father has gotten into. His father is Congressman James Moran, and he's gotten into a lot of fights over the years.
All right, so I would like to call them confrontations.
Okay.
Confrontations, some, yes, were fights, but the media makes it out like all of them were fights, and some of them I wouldn't call a fight.
Okay. Well, one of the most recent confrontations was captured in season 3 of American Crime Story on FX, which talks about his incident with Bill Clinton during the Monica Lewinsky affair. So that's obviously very relevant. Then there was the time that he punched Stephen Colbert in the face on his show. Okay. Then there was the run-in with the Oscar director Bernardo Bertolucci.
Yeah,
right?
The guy who directed The Last Emperor. Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
So there's that story, and then there was, of course, the fight that was supposed to happen purposefully with former D.C. Mayor Marion Barry, which then rolled into actually a fight with Joe Frazier.
Yes.
But then the thing that's most relevant is the fact that Top Gun 2 is just being released, or just been released yesterday.
Yeah.
And your dad had a confrontation with the real-life Maverick. Duke Cunningham is the real person, Congressman Duke Cunningham, portrayed by Tom Cruise in both Top Gun 1 and 2.
Yeah.
And so that obviously is very relevant since it just came out and people are talking about it. And so let's set the story straight, because I know there's a ton of versions of what actually happened. So let's hear what the real story is.
So my dad does not want to talk about this on camera. That was the original idea, but you know, I've the stories that you hear when we post these videos, some of them are, you know, information I've gotten from my father, some of them from other sources that were present for these things, and so but I do think I have a more accurate portrayal based on what I've seen in the media. So I'll share what happened with Duke Cunningham.
Okay.
So a little background information: Duke Cunningham was a Navy Top Gun. He is the person the movie Top Gun was based on, and he.
What was the year that he was congressman?
He was congressman for a very long time from San Diego, and he, you know, he was not known as a good person. Republicans and Democrats alike. I just spoke with a Republican congressman this weekend. I won't say his name, but that just felt like Duke Cunningham was a reprehensible human being, and I think that's a widely held belief. He was a bully. He had this habit of when somebody was much older than him or smaller than him, and most people were smaller than him. He was a big guy, and Duke Cunningham was a boxer in the Navy as well. He was a competitive boxer, and he had this routine that Lyndon Johnson also did, where Duke Cunningham would poke people in the chest, and I just, you know, my dad and I both have a long history of hating bullies.
As do many people.
Yes, but I mean, it's led to some expulsions for me and stuff like that, and didn't help that ethos did not help my school career. But, you know, so dad was kind of predisposed not to like him. And then I don't want this to be a political thing, so I'm not going to get into details of it, but there was a war going on, and my dad and Maverick, Duke Cunningham, were on opposite sides of it. And Duke Cunningham got on C-SPAN and he said something that was just morally horrible. He said my dad had blood on his hands for his stance on this. And so a leader in the House of Representatives, I'm going to try to mention a few names. I will mention the names that have to be mentioned because it's relevant, but I'll try to leave the other names out. Said, you know, called my dad in and said, we're going to make Duke apologize because that was horrible. I'm going to have him get on the House floor, C-SPAN will film it, and he's going to apologize. And my understanding is that my dad said that he is going to handle this like he would handle it in South Boston, which is where he's from.
Okay.
Now you should know that my dad is an Irish Catholic like myself, and it came out that there were some people prejudiced about that during this situation we're about to talk with. But I know that the Irish have a reputation for making it go physical maybe more often than other races, and sometimes
as do Bostonians.
As do Bostonians, which are almost all Irish, and so he and I, unfortunately, I've been that way too. If you've seen our Milan video when we got mugged,
It's different. We were attacked.
That's right. So right, but essentially, this is what I would say. The move that has most baffled my whole family is the move where Trump called Ted Cruz's wife ugly and did a tweet with a picture of his wife and a picture of Ted Cruz's wife, basically saying hot, ugly pig or some horrible thing like that. And Ted Cruz spent one day kind of saying it wasn't okay because it was in the primaries, but then we realized it was politically advantageous for him to forgive Trump. He forgave him and everything was cool. And now, ever since then, positive words coming out of his mouth about Trump or every other word. Okay. And however you feel about that, that is the opposite of the way my dad is. My dad really cares. My dad really has principles. And these are all incidences where it's a situation where he's standing up for his principles. And that's what he did here. So he approached Duke Cunningham.
On the floor of the House.
On the floor of the House, and said, hey, we're going to go outside and deal with this. Uh-huh. And he meant talk, but Duke Cunningham was going to have to apologize to his face. So there was some physical grabbing when Duke didn't want to come outside, and obviously my dad didn't want to do this on camera, so what you see on camera is him kind of grabbing him a little bit, and then you see him shove Duke, and you can hear a very loud sound because the doors are very large there, and Duke comes through.
These are the back doors where they enter the house.
Right. So that's the part that's not in dispute. Everything else happened off camera, and so the stories are crazy and all over the place.
And numerous.
So I'm going to tell you, just from talking to various people, what my understanding is about what happened, which is that he took him out in the hallway and his intention was assumedly to speak with him. But keep in mind, Duke Cunningham, Maverick, is a real life boxer. He's a boxer in the Navy, an adept one, and physically larger than my dad. So Duke Cunningham threw a punch at my dad, threw the first punch. I want to point that out. And my dad's arm, and I think somebody told me his hand was open at first, but then just adrenaline took over, and so my dad closed his fist and punched his fist as a way of blocking it. But although my dad doesn't have the boxing credentials that Duke Cunningham does, he's a very strong guy. And so he throws a stronger punch, and as a result, Duke Cunningham broke his wrists and most of his fingers with that punch. And then Bob Dornan, and I have to mention his name because I can't tell a story without mentioning his name. He comes running out, and he's yelling at my dad, and he goes to charge my dad, and another congressman who I won't mention grabbed Bob Dornan by the neck, and he picked him up. So like Bob Dornan's feet are dangling in the air, and he's saying, "You can't touch me, I'm a presidential candidate," because he was running for president at the time. For the nomination that eventually went to Bob Dole, Bob Dornan was running in that. And so my dad says, if he wants to fight, fine, but I'm not going to punch him while you're holding him, let him go. So this guy lets Bob Dornan go, and then Bob sees, I guess, Duke in a state of what happens when you engage in physical activity with my dad, and I think he decided the better of it and just started barking. And then another congressman tried to, my dad didn't see this, so he probably wouldn't say this, but other people did. He kind of tried to sucker punched my dad, and another person grabbed him, and they started fighting. And by the time the Secret Service or Capitol Police or whoever it was showed up to break up the fight, it was kind of a melee. There was a lot of people fighting each other. And so that's brought that to a close. So then a congressional leader approached my father to tell him that Duke was in the cloakroom, and he was very upset. I've heard from some sources that involved he was actually in tears. And so my dad felt bad about it, and he went in there and he spoke with him. And they said some personal things. I don't know if I really want to share this or whether I could share it really accurately, but it had to do with, the time that Duke Cunningham had served his country, which is a very important thing to my father. Anybody who knows him, he was on the Defense Appropriations Committee and is an enormous supporter of the troops. Hey, Sean Keller, head of Wounded Warriors, who my dad has taken many requests from. So they wound up essentially hugging it out. There may not have been an actual hug, but they wound up coming to an agreement. That is a part that nobody talks about because of what happened subsequent to that, which is they were informed, because obviously being physical on the House floor is not acceptable. They were told that they had to apologize. And
they both had to apologize.
They both had to
publicly on
the House floor. That's correct, because obviously it was in the news because the first part of it.
Right.
So they Duke Cunningham goes to apologize, and he had one of these Mickey Mouse casts because of all the wrist and the fingers.
Mickey Mouse, like Disney?
Yeah, like a Mickey Mouse. You know how if you picture Mickey Mouse's hands, I guess we could.
Okay.
It was like that, and so that got a lot of attention, and he apologized. And then my dad did not apologize. He didn't feel my dad is he's gotten in trouble an enormous amount of time for saying honest things, which is a death knell for a politician. And honestly, he didn't feel like he should apologize, so he didn't. And my understanding is you'd have to ask him, but his stance was Duke Cunningham was asking for an ass whooping. I gave him what he was asking for, and we've talked it out amongst ourselves, and I don't want to get on and apologize for something I don't feel like where I did anything wrong.
Okay.
So do you want to know, and you're curious how this whole played out, the life of Duke Cunningham?
Yeah.
Well,
or I can watch the movie.
I don't think
the
movie doesn't cover this part. Duke Cunningham wound up ending his congressional career in jail. Duke gets, because of the fact that Top Gun and presumably Top Gun 2 is based on his life, he gets royalty sales. And Top Gun was a big hit. Top Gun 2 just made $134 million over the weekend. And so he gets royalties there for that. Mm-hmm. Back then, congressmen, who don't make a lot today, congressmen and senators are not highly paid, but I think they made about $120,000. Yeah. So about the same as like a Domino's supervisor, okay? So it wasn't a lot of money, but Duke Cunningham drove a gold Rolls Royce.
So he was showy.
He was showy. He had a lot of indications of wealth. And it's not, many congressmen and senators are born to wealth or become wealthy before they get in it. Senator Mark Warner's a good example. He made a lot of money in the cellular industry and then became a senator. But that wasn't the case with Duke Cunningham. So people were wondering, he had this huge luxurious boat and that, and people were suspicious. And it turned out what happened was he was chairman of the Defense Appropriations Committee, which is the position where you are most likely to get bribes. And my dad's one of the few people that has not gotten in trouble from that position. But he took various forms of bribes, poker games where he was not anteing and was somehow always winning. He purchased a house from a defense contractor at a very low price and resold it to the same guy a year later for much more money. His boat was a situation where I think he underpaid for it slightly. So, he wound up going to jail, and he was going to be in jail probably for the rest of his life, and Donald Trump pardoned him. And so now he's out of jail and enjoying the the fruits of the Top Gun 2 success.
So this is an ignorant question I don't know the answer to.
Okay.
He's still alive.
Duke Cunningham's still alive. I'm assuming he lives in San Diego.
He did his time in jail and
did Trump pardon him, and he got out, and he's good.
Okay.
So
he was semi-recently released?
Well, obviously, semi-recently.
I mean,
so, you know, he people don't have a good opinion of him. He made his choices. That's it. But I would just like to say, like, all of these situations are, you know, you talk about celebrities, but I mean, my dad also took down a mugger running out of a bank. He's, you know, he's dealt with other situations because that was because he's principled and he cares.
Well, he's incredibly strong mentally as well. So I think that he powers through a ton of stuff, like a double knee replacement instead of one at a time. Running a marathon where he never, many marathons that he probably shouldn't have physically been able to do.
So if you later on we will post. I'll talk about the Bill Clinton thing. Obviously, it's been on TV, so that's not a secret. I'll talk about the Stephen Colbert.
However, we actually haven't seen it.
We haven't seen it, but so many people have told us we're going to watch it that I guess we will watch it. So, if you want to hear more of these stories, stay tuned.
And I'm sure we don't have to say this because I bet there's going to be a bunch of comments below about this or questions.
Yeah, so be sure to ask questions in the comments, and I'll answer anyone that I have personal knowledge or close to personal knowledge.
All right.
All right, thanks guys.